Hello, welcome to the Elone Show. I'm your host, John Elone. In this episode, no regulars, because reasons, as always. As for our guest, he's from Sweden, and he's a consultant in business and change management. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Mats Larsson.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be on the show, and thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. So, how's life?
It's great. um, I have a very interesting job. I'm married to Bodil, who's uh, we've been married for 35 years, and I have two grown-up daughters. It's a great life.
Wow, brilliant. And is there anything you're working on at the moment?
Yes, I'm working on a new book, a follow-up of the previous book, How Building the Future Really Works. The new book is called The Consequences of the Economic and Social Consequences of the Rapid Change to Electric Vehicles.
Ah, interesting. And how long have you been working on this for?
Yeah, well, it depends on how you count, because one way of answering the question would be to say that I started in 1997. No, sorry, 2006, when I wrote did my first project in the area of electromobility, and I started to investigate the amount of resources that will be needed in order to change transport systems to electric vehicles on a large scale. But another way of replying would be to say that I started writing the latest book only 3 months ago. So, but I've incorporated everything I've learned since I began in 2006 into the book. So, uh, in reality, I think the first answer is more correct.
Ah, all right then. Where do you see society and the world 20 years from now?
Yes, um, good question. I see that uh, most probably governments have realized by then or before then that it won't be possible to drive the change to electric vehicle at the pace intended right now. And as decisions have been made to ban the sales of petrol and diesel cars from 2035. But there is not enough electricity. There's not enough power grid capacity. We can't expand charging infrastructure rapidly enough to make this possible. So politicians and governments need to realize that we need to adapt the pace of the change to the amount of resources that will be needed and the amount of resources that are available. So I believe that we have come a lot further in the implementation of electric vehicles, and that governments have adapted the pace to what's realistic in terms of resource needs. Uh, I can only manage. I can only mention one of the aspects of resource needs. In order to change all 32 million cars of the UK, um, there will be a need for 100 terawatt hours of electricity every year, and that amounts to 30% of the current power generation in the country. So, and of course, you know that the power that's generated right at present, most of it is already used for existing purposes. So changing the entire car fleet to electric vehicles will require a vast expansion um, power generation, power grids, etc. And 100 terawatt hours is actually the generation of 9 nuclear reactors. So it's a really big amount of power that's needed to drive all cars and an increasing share of trucks and buses on electricity.
Fabulous. If you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
Wow, that's also a good question. I'd like to live somewhere warmer. My wife and I have been discussing moving to Spain when we retire. So that would be a possibility. I used to live for 2 years. We used to live for 2 years in southern Germany, which was also very nice in the Stuttgart area. But actually, I'm quite happy where I am, and but I'd like to to actually live somewhere warmer, especially this time of year when we have some snow here and temperatures are around zero or below.
Hmm, nice, very good. And for your book, How Building the Future Really Works, what are the key points that this book focuses on?
Yeah, it focuses on, as I've mentioned, the resources that will be needed to change the world to the transportation systems to sustainability, but it also discusses other changes like the change to autonomous vehicles and the resources that would be needed in order to do that, and the change to a circular economy where resources are used over and over again in circular loops is also touched upon. And the one of the main aspects is to compare the present approach to change to electric vehicles to how technology has been developed and how large scale systems have been implemented in the past. Because in the past, very large public investments have been made in the development and implementation of new technologies in the early stages. And research has shown that these long-term and large-scale investments are necessary in order to bring the cost of new technologies down to levels where ordinary people and a large share of people and companies can use them. Uh, for example, you know, computers were developed at first after the Second World War um, by the US government, and the internet was developed a little later as a project by the American organization ARPA, as the Advanced Projects Agency that was which developed the ARPANET, and after that. The long after that, actually, the internet was developed based on those technologies. And the Apollo program initiated the development of space technologies, and without the Apollo program we wouldn't have GPS and other technologies today that were many other technologies and solutions that have been developed since the Apollo program and that have been based on the developments that were initiated during this decade of development. So many of the technologies of the past, or actually most of the technologies of the past, have been developed largely on government financing in combination with private companies co-financing innovation projects. So I describe in the book how present projects are expected to be run, and the present development of electric electromobility is expected to run autonomously, driven by market forces. And I compare this to how technology development and large scale implementation has been done in the past in projects that have been largely financed by governments in the early stages. And actually, these present technologies or existing technologies that were that have been developed over decades or half a century, a century in many cases, or more than a century. When we, if we look at the automotive technologies, telephony, uh, power grids, and so on, they have been developed in partnerships between public and private partners, and they have been developed to a large extent also on public financing. And now we expect here to that the implementation of electric vehicles will go smoothly, and the only thing that governments seem to expect to have to do is to ban the sales of new petrol and diesel cars from 2035, and then everything else will be solved by the market, which is not very realistic, as these technologies are at a very early stage in their development, and they are still very expensive compared to competing technologies, those of petrol and diesel propulsion.
Yes, absolutely. What's the best way to travel?
The best, I travel by electric car mostly. I also have a petrol car because I sometimes need the space and I sometimes need to uh, tow a trailer. And but so but of course, when I travel longer distances, I I go by train, if possible. If it's not possible, I sometimes fly. I try to fly as little as possible, but of course, when I need to go longer distances, or when I go to from southern Sweden to Poland or to other countries across the Baltic Sea, um, I need I need to fly as well, because it simply takes too much time to go by car
Ah, yes, I can see that.
or
If
train.
your Ah, okay, yes. Interesting. If your life was a meal, what kind of meal would it be?
That's yeah. I sometimes I like a steak a lot, but I also like fish. So I don't know how to compare my life to a meal, but it would be to some extent quite elaborately cooked meal. I think one of the dishes um, cooked by Gordon Ramsay or some other star chef, but aspects of it would also be like a straightforward hamburger. Um, I love curries, actually. Indian food is my favorite of all, but I don't think I could compare my life to uh, an Indian curry. But I like spicy dishes.
Fabulous. What is something popular now, but in 5 years, everyone will look back on it and be embarrassed they liked it?
Yeah, I think uh, the I hope that that the expectation that the market will uh, automatically change transportation systems to electric vehicles will will be something people look back upon and say, I'm embarrassed that I actually thought this would be realistic, and that we have been too naive in expecting the market to be able to do this. The market is not able to develop specific results. It has never, like in 1950 or 1960, you wouldn't be, no one at that time would have been able to say how transportation systems would look 20 years from then, or how space technologies or space travel systems would look. The market has created the present solutions based on the cost efficiency of the different technologies, and at the pace that has been realistic, depending on the investments needed, the number of the different uh, companies and government organizations and individuals that had to participate, and the expectation that the market will be able to drive this development and create a very specific result in terms of total change to electric vehicles in only 2 decades. I think people will look back at that notion and think that, oh, we were not probably too naive to think to have thought this, and I'm a little embarrassed, or very embarrassed, perhaps some would say, that I actually thought this would be possible.
Yeah, absolutely. If someone wrote a book about you, what do you think its title would be?
Yes, uh, I'd actually like to collaborate with someone who'd who'd like to write a book about me, because I've done this now for uh, almost 20 years. I've explored the development of new technologies and the implementation of new technologies um, for since 1997, when we wrote the first book, which was about the future of e-business. And at that time in 1997, when we wrote the book and it was published in 1998, um, I'd uh, we said that in the future, e-business companies will do business on the internet, and very few people at that time believed that this would happen. They couldn't see that there were advantages to making to, to doing business on the internet. And then from 2005 2006, I started to explore the uh, resources that will be needed to change the world's transportation systems to electromobility. So I think I've done a few things that would be interesting to write a book about. I don't. I'd leave the setting of the title to the author, actually, because I think uh, it could include words like visionary. It could include words like whistleblower. It could include the word um, uh, multi-talented, perhaps. I don't know. But I don't know exactly what the title would be.
Hmm, that's alright. There's always time for everything.
Yes.
What weird food combinations do you really enjoy?
Yeah, going back to Indian food, that's my absolute favorite. And um, as I recall, you're in Manchester, right?
Yes.
Yes, I've I love to go in Manchester to I don't recall the name of the street, but the street where there are 20, 25 Indian restaurants, and I can select any Indian meal I like. So that's well, that's one of my favorite places in the world. But anytime I go to the UK, I especially enjoy the opportunity to have Indian meals. We do have a lot of Indian restaurants here in Sweden as well, but I feel the variety is bigger in places like Manchester, Birmingham, or London. Um, I've never been to India, but I think I'd enjoy the food there as well a lot because it must be wonderful to get these meals from uh, the real the chefs that really know how to cook them.
Hmm. Yes, absolutely. If you could travel back in time, what decade would you want to live in?
That's uh, I I think I was born in a quite at a quite good point in history in the 1960s when there were a lot of opportunity and we'd been um, past the big wars of the early 20th century. We'd been past the hardship um, experienced by my parents, my parents' generation, and so on. I think the 1950s to 1960s was a very good time to be born, and I think I've been fortunate in being allowed to experience the development over these past decades.
Yes, me too. What natural landmark would you like to see someday?
Well, I met a person in the UK once who had he was one of the first persons I met who'd made, which was not then called a bucket list, but he had set a goal for himself to see the various landmarks, the roof of the world, and so on in the Himalayas, and um, all that, many other things. Machu Picchu would be nice. Um, it would be really interesting. I haven't spent so much time going to these exceptional um, places. Of course, I'm not an athlete or an adventurer in that sense, but and I've never been able to spend the money necessary to go to these places. But I think some of these, like Machu Picchu, uh, what's called the Mount Rainier? No, no, the presidents, the four presidents in the United States. Uh, Grand Canyon would be nice as well. Um, so there are a number of sites in the United States I'd like to go to, and yeah, all over the world there are places that are really wonderful. I expect, and I haven't been to very many of them, so that's still a lot for me to explore.
Fabulous. If you if you're going on a road trip, what two items do you make sure to bring with you?
My mobile phone, of course. Books. I never like to be without a book. I love to read and experience new things in that way. um, whenever I go on a trip, I like to go to Indian restaurants, but I don't bring them with me in that sense. But that's something my wife and I usually do when we're traveling. We visit Indian restaurants. I've been to Indian restaurants in Washington, Berlin, and different places in the UK, and well, a lot of other places, of course. Here in Sweden as well. So, but there are not so many special things that I need to bring. If I forget something, I can always uh, buy it on the way, I think. But I try. I pack a suitcase, some shirts, some trousers, and few pairs of shoes. I usually go. I usually bring my jogging shoes and my jogging gear as well because I love to run wherever I am and to experience new places that way.
Hmm. All right then. If you could host a talk show, who would you have on as your first guest?
Yeah, that's who would that be? I'd I'd have I've tried to influence uh, leaders over the past 20 years and get them to understand that we need to set the change to electric vehicles on a realistic time frame. So I'd like to invite perhaps the chairman of the EU EU Commission, um, Rishi Sunak, so, or some other high-level politician who needs to understand that we can't change to electric vehicles as rapidly as governments expect today, um, because it will do a lot of damage to the economy, and so we need to set this change on a realistic time frame. And I ask him a number of questions during the talk show, but I take the opportunity before and afterwards to try to discuss my favorite topics.
Yes, absolutely. What song is stuck in your head for the last week or month or so?
I usually have songs stuck in my head. Usually they're not my favorite songs, however, and I can't recall most of them, but I'd love to have. I try to have Rolling Stones songs or, um, well, "Wish You Were Here" by Pink Floyd is a great song. I'd like to have stuck in my head. Um, there are so many. Um, we've been listening a little to 70s rock over the Christmas holiday. Slade. um, and their songs, which what my wife and I listened a lot to in our when were young. Um, so there are many songs from the 19 late 1960s, early 1970s that I think are the best in the world.
Fabulous. Where was the furthest point on Earth from where you were born?
The farthest point on Earth, I think, it must be somewhere in the Indian Ocean or perhaps the Pacific. I was born in southern Sweden, so um, when I was a, when I was a kid, we used to say that if we dig through uh, the um, the earth, we get to China. But we soon realized that that's not true. We come out somewhere in the middle of the Pacific or the Indian Ocean. And I don't recall exactly where it is, but somewhere, something like that.
Okay, I can see that, kind of. And that is all we have for this episode. It's great having you on, Mats, talking about consulting in business change management and as well as advance and talks with electric vehicles and sustainability for the future. It's been great.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and I really enjoyed being a guest on the show.
Me too. And until next time, stay tuned for more.